Summary of She Stoops to Conquer by Oliver Goldsmith. The first act starts at the Hardcastle's country home. Mrs. Hardcastle tells her husband that she and her husband never get out of their country home to see what's new in the city. Hardcastle says he loves old things, even his wife, who is old. Mr. Hardcastle says she was young when she had Tony, the son of her first husband. Tony is not yet 21 years old. Hardcastle is upset with Tony for being immature and enjoying pulling jokes on people. Tony comes on stage on his way to a bar, and his mother chases him off stage and begs him to stay and hang out with them. Kate, Hardcastle's daughter, walks in. He talks about how trendy her clothes are, which he doesn't like. Kate tells him that they agreed that she would wear whatever she wants in the morning and dress in a stuffy way at night. Big news from Hardcastle: Marlow, the son of his friend Sir Charles, is coming to visit. Hardcastle hopes that Kate and Marlow will get married. Hardcastle says that Marlow is known for being smart, good-looking, and humble. This account is good up until the last part, which Kate doesn't like. She decides to try to present herself well to Marlow. Hardcastle walks away, leaving Kate to think about the guest. She is joined by her cousin Constance, whom she tells that Marlow is going to be there soon. Constance tells her that she knows Marlow because Hastings, the man she likes, is best friends with him. As a result, Marlow often falls in love with lower-class women instead of upper-class ones, which is a strange trait. Mrs. Hardcastle wants Constance to marry Tony, her cousin, so that the jewelry she received will stay in the family. Constance tells Kate that she acts like she wants to marry Tony so Mrs. Hardcastle won't think she likes Hastings. She's lucky that Tony doesn't want to marry her more than she wants to marry him. Tony is drinking with some low-class guys in a bar when the scene changes. The owner of the bar says that two guys who look good have come in and say they are looking for Mr. Hardcastle's house. Tony knows this has to be Marlow, so he plans to make Marlow think Hardcastle's house is an inn. Hardcastle is trying to teach his workers how to act in front of his guests at the start of Act 2. Soon after, Marlow and Hastings get to what they think is an inn. When Hardcastle walks in, he tries to start a talk with his guests, but the two young men don't pay attention because they think he is just a poor innkeeper. Hardcastle is shocked by how rude and cocky they are with him. Hardcastle goes with Marlow because he insists on being shown his room. Constance comes in when Hastings is alone. When she hears that Hastings thinks he is in an inn, she thinks it must be Tony's trick. Hastings states that they should not tell Marlow about his mistake because he will feel bad and leave right away if he does. Hastings wants Constance to run away with him, but she doesn't want to lose her wealth, the jewels, because she will only get them if she gets married with her aunt's permission. She tells him she will run away with him when she gets the jewels. When Marlow comes back, he says that Hardcastle won't leave him alone. As it turns out, Hastings tells Marlow that both Constance and her cousin Kate are at this inn at the same time. Marlow stops moving out of fear. When Kate walks in, she tries to start a talk with Marlow. But when Hastings and Constance leave Kate and Marlow alone, Marlow is too scared to finish his thought or even look at Kate's face. He cuts the talk short and quickly leaves. Before she leaves the stage, Kate thinks to herself, "If he weren't so shy, I would be interested in him." Tony and Constance walk in first, then Hastings and Mrs. Hardcastle. While Tony tries to avoid her advances, Constance flirts with him in front of Mrs. Hardcastle. As Hastings talks to Mrs. Hardcastle, he shows her Constance and Tony and tells her that they are engaged. Tony is very upset about this. A woman named Mrs. Hardcastle is told by Hastings that he will try to reason with Tony. Constance and Mrs. Hardcastle then leave. Tony finds out that Hastings loves Constance and wants to run away with her. Tony is thrilled and says he will do everything he can to help the couple. Hardcastle and Kate talk about how they feel about Marlow, which is a very different experience for each of them. He is shocked by how brave Marlow is, while she thinks he is very shy. Kate talks her dad into giving Marlow another chance so they can find out what kind of person he really is. Tony gives Hastings a box with Constance's jewelry in it that he stole from his mom's drawers. Hastings leaves, and Constance and Mrs. Hardcastle come in. Constance tries to get Mrs. Hardcastle to let her try on her jewelry, but she won't give in. Tony tells Mrs. Hardcastle to tell Constance that the jewels are missing, which makes Constance very upset. Tony tells Constance in secret that he gave her jewelry to Hastings, who is getting ready for them to run away together. At the same time, Mrs. Hardcastle found out that the jewels are gone. Tony makes fun of his upset mother, and the two of them leave. Kate walks in with her maid Pimple by her side, wearing the old-fashioned dress that her dad likes. Marlow's thought that he was in an inn makes her laugh. She knows about Tony's joke. Pimple says Marlow thought Kate was the barmaid at the inn. Kate tells him that she will use the mistake to her advantage so that he won't be so shy around her. Pimple leaves, and Marlow comes in. Kate talks to Marlow with the voice of a poor woman while acting to be a maid. Marlow thinks she's pretty and starts flirting with her right away. Hardcastle walks in and sees them kissing. Marlow leaves the room, and Hardcastle tells Kate that he is going to kick Marlow out of his house. Kate talks her dad into letting her show him that Marlow isn't what he seems to be. At the start of Act 4, Constance and Hastings are making plans to run away together. Constance tells Hastings that she heard Sir Charles is going to be there soon. Hastings then tells Constance that he has given Marlow her box of jewels to keep safe. They both leave. When he walks in, Marlow feels good about giving the box of jewels to the landlord, Mrs. Hardcastle, to keep safe. When Hastings walks in, Marlow tells him that he left the jewels safely with the landlady. Hastings goes without showing how upset he is that Mrs. Hardcastle has the jewels back. When Hardcastle walks in, he starts arguing with Marlow, whose staff are already drunk. As he storms off, Hardcastle says he never thought Sir Charles's son would be so rude. This comment makes Marlow confused, but just then Kate walks in. Marlow starts to think something is wrong and asks Kate where they are. Kate tells him they are at Mr. Hardcastle's house. Marlow is sickened by his mistake. Kate hasn't told anyone who she really is yet. She's pretending to be a poor family relative. Marlow tells Kate that he is leaving, and she starts to cry. It moves him that she cares so much about him. They talk about Constance's plan to run away with Hastings, even though she doesn't have the jewels with her. When Mrs. Hardcastle walks in, the cousins act like they are flirting so she won't figure out that they are planning to run away together. There is a letter from Hastings for Tony, but Tony can't read it, so his mother reads it to him. The letter tells about the plan to run away. Mrs. Hardcastle is very angry and tells Constance that she is sending her to Aunt Pettigrew's house, which is very far away. Hastings walks in and yells at Tony for telling everyone the secret. Marlow walks in and yells at both Tony and Hastings for lying to him about where they are. Constance is very upset and begs Hastings to love her no matter what, even if it means they have to wait a few years to get married. Tony tells Hastings to meet him in the yard in 2 hours to make up for what he did after Constance leaves. In Act V, Hardcastle and Sir Charles, who has just arrived, laugh about Marlow thinking the house was an inn. Hardcastle says he saw Marlow hold Kate's hand and believes they will get married. Marlow walks in and officially tells Hardcastle he's sorry. Hardcastle says it doesn't matter because Marlow and Kate are going to get married soon, but Marlow says he doesn't like Kate. Marlow storms out when Hardcastle doesn't believe him. Kate walks in and tells the two dads that Marlow likes her. In 30 minutes, she tells the two dads to hide behind a screen to see proof of Marlow's thoughts. Tony shows up in the yard and tells Hastings that he drove his mother and Constance around in a loop instead of taking them to Aunt Pettigrew's house. Mrs. Hardcastle is scared because she thinks they're lost and in dangerous country. Hastings runs off quickly to find Constance. Hastings tries to get Constance to run away with him in another part of the yard. She says she's too tired to run away from the stress of the night. Instead, she wants to tell Hardcastle what's going on and hope that he can his wife to let them get married. Hardcastle and Sir Charles hide behind a screen in the house to listen to Marlow and Kate talk. Now Kate doesn't act like she's a bartender, she just talks in her normal way. Marlow says he wants to stay with her but doesn't want to marry someone of lower class because he doesn't want to let his family down. Kate tells him that she is related to the woman he came to see. The two dads come out from behind the screen and ask Marlow why he lied to them about how he felt about Kate as he kneels down in front of her. When Marlow finds out who Kate really is, he feels bad again for being so fooled. Mrs. Hardcastle and Tony walk in. Mrs. Hardcastle knows where she is now. Mrs. Hardcastle says that Hastings and Constance have ran off together. This makes her feel better though, because she will get to keep Constance's jewelry. But at that very moment, Hastings and Constance walk in. Sir Charles tells Hardcastle that Hastings is a good person because he knows him. Hardcastle asks Tony if he's sure he doesn't want to marry his cousin. Tony says he is sure, but it doesn't matter because he can't officially say no to marrying Constance until he turns 21. After this, Hardcastle says that Mrs. Hardcastle has been lying about Tony being 21 years old. At this point, Tony tells Constance that he doesn't want to marry her, so she can marry Hastings and keep her money. The two young couples, Hastings and Constance and Marlow and Kate, are getting married, but Mrs. Hardcastle is somewhat disappointed.
About the author. Oliver Goldsmith was born in Ireland to Anglo-Irish parents. He became one of London's most famous writers of his time. As soon as he graduated from college in Dublin, he quit medical school and walked around Europe for a while, saving little money. He finally settled down in London in 1756. First, he worked as an assistant to a pharmacist. Then, he became a writer for the daily papers. He composed songs, plays, short stories, and books. Some of the best writers of our time, like the philosopher Edmund Burke and the poet Samuel Johnson, admired his lively, easy-to-read style. Johnson wrote the first real English dictionary. Goldsmith was accepted into these high-class groups, but he was known to be highly jealous of his friends, socially awkward, self-conscious about how he looked, drunk, gambler, and terrible at managing his own money. His friends often talked about how different his clear, well-organized, and beautifully styled work was from his messy personal life. Goldsmith died in 1774.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.